Hello and welcome back, everybody. I'm Dan John from danjohnuniversity.com. This is our podcast. Remember, if you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I'm trying to get that in as soon as I can. I try to tell people how to contact the podcast because I still get questions down there. How do I contact the podcast? And I'm trying to get that answer in before 9 seconds. I'll have to time myself to see how I did. Hey, listen, this is episode 163. And every week, the numbers remind me of something. This week was my breakthrough throw as a high school senior when I added 14 feet to my personal record in one day. I think it was against Jefferson High School, and I threw 163. And that put me on track to become a university-level thrower in the not-too-far future. And I'm here today because of all the hard work that little boy did when he was young, and I sure appreciate it. So hats off to the 1970s Dan John for setting me up for all this. I appreciate it. Well, we have some good questions this week. I want to kind of riff on one or two points that come up in some of the questions. I like to answer the questions you send in. Occasionally, I like to have discussions and dialogues with people. But I think one of the strengths of this podcast is the fact that I'm willing to answer people's questions. I watch some other podcasts, in fact, I like some of them, where basically I get the sense sometimes that the person is just selling products. And if I come off that way, I apologize, but I try to answer people's questions because I get how confusing it can be out there. It is difficult to find good fitness information. I hope I have it. I know some of you disagree with me. And it's weird. If you disagree with me, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Do it your way. Now, if you get hurt doing something stupid I tell you not to do, well then honestly, I told you not to and you're hurt, and that's okay. I think you should wear a helmet when you ride a motorcycle. I think you should wear a seatbelt. And if you choose not to, I'm fine with that. But I'm not going to well, I won't say anything. Wear your seatbelt, wear your helmet. All right, let's get started. We have a question from Kyle. Kyle, how are you? I read your article about doing back extensions when you were in junior college. Oh yeah, we called them back then hyperextensions. The stuff they did later, that glute ham raise, the GHRs, I never was a fan of it. When that machine first showed up at the Upper Limit Gym, it was bigger, faster, stronger. That kind of really pioneered developing them here in the United States. Basically, it just became a hamstring injury maker. Maybe it's because we didn't coach it right. Maybe it's because whatever. But it put so much stress on the hamstrings. A lot of people are doing those Nordic curls now. It's that we used to call them sprinters curls. I don't know how the Nordics got it from the sprinters, or the sprinters got it from everybody else, but oh boy, sometimes you put so much pressure on a muscle that truly doesn't need that level of intensity that you end up long-term, like you might be in better condition. Short-term, long-term, it doesn't work. I always thought hyperextensions, Alexiev did them. I know that Rieger did them. I know that Kolatov did them, and that was the reason I did them. And I loved them. My lower back in junior college was freakishly big. Now, sadly, it's not the kind of muscle you can really show off. So, if you show off your spinal erectors at a party, most people want you to leave. So let's get started. How did these fit into your overall training program at the time? With Dick Nottmeyer, I was doing them on Tuesdays and Saturdays. It was part of the warm-up. On Tuesdays and Saturdays, we did front squats, and I would have done the front squats right after the warm-up, the hyperextensions, then the front squats. After the front squats, I'd go up to a certain load, 3 sets of 3, whatever it was, usually with Dick, max, and then bring the weight back down to 135 and then 60 kilos and work the way back doing jerks. So not very complicated. My biggest thing, I was always looking for a nice, so I did 2 kinds every workout. I would do some that were for pure pumping reasons. So I would get some reps in, and I wanted to really fill my lower back up with blood, so to speak, just like a bodybuilder in pumping. The reason was, as a discus thrower, I was already starting to get those stress problems you get in your lower back. It manifested itself a few years ago, a few years later. I did have a serious hamstring pull and a serious spinal erector pull, both on the right side, which I'm sure if you're a chiropractor or somebody who's more, kind of attuned to this kind of thing, it would make sense that a right-handed discus thrower would hurt their right spinal erector and right hamstring. I'm not sure, but that's what happened to me. And then after we got those sets of 10, 15, or 20, I loved just the barbell sets of 20. It made me feel good. I would stand up. And if you've ever been lifting a long time, sometimes you'll find an exercise that just makes you feel good. And that's how I felt after doing those 20s. And then we'd go heavy. My personal record, the system we were using, not going to sound like much, but it was, I think it was about 210 pounds. But we had these plates called the Big Blue plates. And when you train with them, they were called the Big Blue Specials. And I did 2 of them. They were 102.5 each. So I was balancing double 102.5s in the back of my head while doing them. Again, doesn't sound like much load, but for that exercise, it's an incredible amount. So that's how we work them in. I am currently working around an injury that prevents me from making much progress in the deadlift and or hinge movements, but back extensions seem to be well tolerated. Well, Kyle, that's good news. We call them hyperextensions, but one of the things you'll notice, I mean, if you go back into the mid-1980s even, when the hip thrust, now I know Brett Contreras developed the modern hip thrust the way we think of it, but in the early 1980s, people were doing a lot of, glute raises, glute bridges, and a lot of that exercise called Superman, or just prone extensions. And it kind of got thrown out in the 80s because of the advent of, Jane Fonda and the fire hydrants and all that nonsense. I'm sure there's value to it. But so those exercises have been around a long time. It's interesting, if you were with me and your back were to hurt, I would take you back to the early 1980s and have you do the way we did things then. So that was those unloaded hip extensions, and then the cuddle, or the Stu McGill puts the hand here, but we used to do the cuddle curl-ups. I hate to call them crunches, but they were just those slow, intensive curl-ups. And then the Supermans and the back extensions. That was a thing we did quite a bit, and it just kind of disappeared historically. I am considering using these things as my hinge, or in addition to some light deadlifts, to get some extra volume in my posterior chain. Any insights on how to incorporate these into easy strength and or 3 sets of 8 would be appreciated. Well, Kyle, one of the things I want you to know is that I would put this exercise into that realm of the hip thrust, that curl up, the Supermans, all those. It's not going to be an easy strength kind of exercise, at least where you're at now, and it might never be. But what I would suggest, if you can think about it, is doing these exercises as more of a warm-up, as a remedial at the end of the workout. In fact, doing some before and some after might be a really good idea. I would focus a little bit higher on the volume as appropriate. Now, if you cramp up doing them, well, let's have another conversation. I mean, if this exacerbates the injury, well, obviously there's a problem. But I think if you were to add, now I did add 2 more to your thing, the hip thrust, that curl up. Look at Stu McGill's work on that, much better than I. The back extensions, and maybe and suitcase carries. Boy, that's a nice 4-way approach right there. Yeah, I think that might help. Now, is it going to cure it? Boy, backs are a strange thing, but I think it'll go a long way to helping out with this issue. And let's just hope, Kyle, it is a short-term issue. As for 3 sets of 8 in hyperextensions, that would probably be a pretty appropriate number most of the time for most of our listeners. 3 sets of 8 in hyperextension. It's like, to me, 3 sets of 8 in a curl, or 3 sets of 8 in a tricep extension. Those are the numbers that I'm universally like, yeah. Any isolated limb exercises, curls, tricep extensions, we're making a reach on this with the back. Anytime you say to me 3 sets of 8, I like it because it's reasonable, it's adjustable. We can deal with rest periods a little bit. We can deal with load a lot, and to kind of figure in what you need almost every day, make small decisions. So I like your idea long term, but until you start feeling pretty good, Kyle, let's keep those reps a little higher and a little bit more like these are remedial exercises, accessory exercises, auxiliary exercises. These are to help you get better and not until we get that injury kind of behind us in the rear view mirror a little bit, okay? A nice little cliche fest right there. And, you know, usually I ignore cliches like the plague. Ron has a question. Thank you, Ron. And Ron's question is extremely short. It's this: what would you suggest as a 2-day per week kettlebell program? Well, I mean, that's why Dan John University has the workout generator. You press the button kettlebell, because that's what you got. You press 2 days a week, and my little algorithm spits out a workout that's going to be perfect for you. Really, let's just go with the fundamentals. I mean, push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Academy and whatever, my mom and dad and my agent. And I think the best pushes, of course, in fact, for most people, are probably kettlebell presses. I like the standing press family. I like the half kneeling press. If you see my video, The Perfect Workout, I teach, and those, I do half kneeling presses most of the time. The downside for pulls with the kettlebell only, it's weird because I think that the kettlebell swing is a pulling exercise of a sort. Now you have to, I don't want to go into this again because I've covered it way too many times, at least in my head. But if you can hang or do pull-ups, that's pretty good. If all you have is kettlebells, press, goblet squat, a ballistic variation, that could be the clean, the swing, or the snatch, and then loaded carries. Those are the best ways to train twice a week with kettlebells, I think. You can put them together in fun little medleys. I wouldn't mind seeing you doing the presses alone because so many people struggle with the press, which is unusual for me because I don't. But I would suggest that most people I talk to now, especially on emails and live when I'm doing workshops, they really do struggle with the press. And so it's difficult. I mean, it's like, if you're 7'6", you know, touching the rim in a basketball is pretty easy. You might struggle understanding why the rest of us have a hard time getting up there. I press fairly competently, very easily, so it's a little hard for me sometimes to completely help people on this issue. Half kneeling press, standing press. It'd be great if you can't do a kettlebell swing correctly. I'm a big fan of the kettlebell clean. I think the ABC workout, the armor building complex, that's 2 double kettlebell cleans, 1 kettlebell press, double kettlebell press, 3 double kettlebell front squats, 2, 1, 3, down, rest, repeat ad nauseum, literally, is probably as close to what most people would say when people say, if you could just do one thing, and I hate that question, but it would be the armor building complex, even though I hate the question. If you can kettlebell snatch 2 days a week, it'd be kind of fun to do something like 1 day a week, you do the presses, you really focus on the presses, you get a lot of extra goblet squats in, you get a lot of extra front squats, and you do some swings. On the other workout of the week, you do the armor building complex, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 rounds. 20 rounds is going to be only 20 presses, but it's going to be 60 front squats. And then after that, finish with some kettlebell snatches. And on both days, if appropriate, finish with a loaded carry. When in doubt with loaded carries, do the suitcase carry. That's the one-handed farmer walk. For many of my females and for many of the men I have with some long-term garbage in their shoulders, we try to get them to move to the waiter walk. But as always, your mileage is going to vary. I think what I just told you is basically what you're going to find at the workout generator. But the nice thing about the workout generator, of course, is when you you have instant feedback on any questions you have. If you don't like this exercise, you just, press the button and it'll give you another one. You don't like that one, you press a button, you get another one, until you find the exercises that fit you and the situation you find yourself in. Thank you. Good question. And I hope that helped. Okay. Okay, we have a question from James, and as always, this is a question it's about the fourth or fifth time I've got this question, and I don't know what to say, but I'll answer. James asks, I'm curious to your view on the knees over toes ATG astograss stuff, particularly their view on long range versus short range exercises and trying to be tendon dominant for athletic qualities. Any other exercises you found to be useful here for creating that athletic spring? Yeah, the number one exercise for spring is not do any flexibility exercises. When you come over here to my house, and more than welcome, there's a whole bunch of books in my library that are old and moldy, and a lot of my books, the pages are yellow because they're so old. This is from 1931, and some of them are from the 1970s, and the pages are falling off. But a lot of materials, at least what I've seen, are things we've done a long time. I always thought I invented walking backwards uphill for training because, I don't know, about 30 years ago at discus camp, we started doing it to help our female athletes who are basketball players, to help them with their knees. Those tib raises, you can see those equipment sold in Strength and Health magazine. I think way back in the 30s, somebody told me. I don't know. If you read John Jesse's book, Encyclopedia of Wrestling Conditioning, you'll find a lot of those exercises. And I understand that the author he also says, there's nothing new under the sun. I am not a fan of excessive flexibility work. I learned the hard way, like a lot of you, that excessive flexibility often leads to injury. And of course, if you're already injured, I don't mind self-help things on the internet, like here's the answer to this or answer that. But if you hurt yourself doing something, or if you just do a bunch of stuff, how are you going to know if that works or not? There's a thing called N=1, and I realize that we're all an experiment of one. And so for some of you, you're going to get a lot of good out of this stuff. The reason I do astograss squats is because as an Olympic lifter, when the weight hits you on the chest, my best clean is 402 or 182.5 kilos. I got to tell you something, folks. When you pick up 400 pounds off the floor and it hits you on the chest, your butt is going to get driven into the ground because it's this thing. Coach Isaac Newton taught me this. It's called the laws of physics. And, I never worried about flexibility as an Olympic lifter because the sport made you flexible. Now, of course, with injuries, with my age, things have changed. And it's not all positive. But Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can come to my house and I'm snatching and clean and jerking. And then I go for a walk. And for me, the Olympic snatch, the Olympic clean and jerk, some kettlebell presses, some hangs, some ab wheels, and walking, rucking, and heavy hands, I'm in pretty good shape for someone of my age. I still lift more weights than a whole bunch of people, and I'm not bragging, it's true. And one of the things I always worry about when these new things come along, I don't want to call it a fad, but when these new things come along, I worry that you're going to, you're going to write a check that your body can't cash later on. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I just, as always, have the big asterisk next to it. My friend Chris Long always says, when you're up to your ass in alligators, it's too late to ask why we drain the swamps. Okay? So just be careful. Petrie asks us a question. Of course, if my name was Petrie, I'd have a very attractive girlfriend. So she would be known as Petrie's dish. Okay. What is your take on non-alcoholic beer? We'll stop right there. No. It's like decaffeinated coffee. I don't even care what the question is. No. 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 It's like these... it's like when they came out with all those no-fat snacks that turned out to be more fattening than high-fat snacks. But I'll continue to read Petrie. What is your take on non-alcoholic beer as a recovery drink? Some say it's the best options. Some say it's just a placebo. Well, I got to tell you, I think as someone who's had a lot of carbonated analgesics, that's what I call beer, there are good things in beer. I mean, it's a fermented food for one thing. And it is rich in a lot of things. It does have alcohol, and after a contest, I got to tell you one thing. If I've dieted down for a weightlifting meet, and my record is I weighed 124 kilos and got down to 110. For our Americans, that's I was 273 and I got down to 242. After you lift and you drink a beer, you can feel your body. I mean, it rebounds you right back up. I can't comment. I mean, for me, the best recovery, the sports I play, recovery drinks aren't that big a deal. It's much more appropriate, if you will, Petrie, to have an appropriate training vision. It's probably more important to have a checklist to make sure you have everything and have your arousal and your tension levels and your heart rate in the correct place. If you do all that before you compete and you have beautiful technique and you adapt well to the situations, your recovery is minimal. I think it's a serious question, and I appreciate you asking, but I'm not a big fan of recovery drinks. Now, having said that, I went to a football game yesterday. I was in the sun for 6 or 7 hours. And when I came home, I have these miracle things. You know, my daughters give me these little packets that you put into water, and they I guess it's the same as drinking the stuff we give babies when they're sick, or the stuff that the fluids they put you into. They're very salty. But I tell you something. I came home and I was slightly burned and I was very dehydrated, and I drank water, and then I drank that and I felt better. So, having said all that, if your body needs water and appropriate fluids and some kind of nutritional intervention, I think you can get most of that by finding a cooler place to be, out of the sun, drink some water, drink an appropriate, whatever your renewal drink is, and probably get some food in you. And if non-alcoholic beer is part of that for you, good. So my answer is not a yes or no. It's going to be it's going to depend on you as much as anybody. Personally, if I'm going to drink a beer, I'm too far along in my adulthood to start drinking. One time I was at a party and someone gave me this stuff called non-alcoholic cold duck. Well, cold duck as a drink is bad enough, and take the booze out makes no sense to me. It's like drinking non-alcoholic whiskey. Now that would be an interesting thing to come up with. There's your moneymaker, Petrie. All right. Number 2, Petrie asked 2 questions today. You being a scholar of exercise history, well, I blush. It is true. I got a massive library. Do you think the classic white t-shirt with a short rolled up sleeve with a pack of cigarettes tucked up in there played a role in young men focusing on bicep training more than the other muscles? I got to tell you, Petrie, I've never thought of that. And when I first read the question, I went, that makes as much sense as anything else. I think the reason the bicep is so popular is because it is showy. Most people approach you this way. The first set of muscles you see in a normal weather condition is going to be your guns, so maybe that's why. If you go back historically, you'll notice Popeye had massive forearms. If you look at the great sculptures of most warriors in history, or most heroes in history, and Michelangelo, Da Vinci, that kind of thing, you'll notice that the ab wall is often enormous. they do. My brother calls it the tortoise look, where you have a huge stomach, but you still have 8-pack or 6-pack on there. All I can say is this: there's probably more truth to that than not truth. I like your insights there. I can't stop thinking about it now that you've got my brain that way. Certainly, if you read women's magazines, they'll tell us that women don't look at biceps. They look at other parts of the body, usually the parts of the body when you're walking away. So I don't know. I love your idea, and it made me laugh. But more importantly, it made me think, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We have a question from David. In your 4-quadrant of movement work, you talk about broadly people usually being better at 2 of the following areas: push or pull, hinge or squat. The way you wrote it isn't the way I explained it, David. It's push, pull, hinge, squat. You mentioned you are a push hinge person. Do you determine this by what comes easily to you movement-wise and mobility-wise, or more loading you can take? The answer would be both, but it's a rare person I work with. I mean, we're talking months, and not even years of experience. We're talking months, hell, weeks of experience, who will say, you know, it's weird, but this comes naturally to me, and that doesn't. When I mention this to experienced lifters, and I'm talking about now decades, they just laugh and they say, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I had never thought of it, but the second I heard you say it, I went, oh yeah. And in everybody's gyms, they'll always have the guy who can, my team, the Sports Pals, we had certain guys who were famous, and I'd be one of the guys who always could clean or, anything, but would get stuck at the bottom. And then there'd be the guy next to him who would be trying to sneak under the bars because they could stand up with anything, but they couldn't pull the weight as high as they needed to. And of course, when you're in certain gyms, depending on where you're in the world, the pull-up standards, especially when I'm in Europe, my students in Europe, they can do pull-ups all day long, and many of them, the men, can't press a 24-kilo bell, which, but here in the States, a lot of the men I work with, first time they see the beast, they can press it, and we have to teach them, it takes weeks to get them to do, 3 pull-ups. So it's a good question, and I appreciate it. So the answer would be a little bit of the both and, where I live most of my life, but almost universally, David, most of us intuitively know which ones we're better at. Within the first weeks or months of training. Okay, thank you. Okay, we got a question from Robert. Hello, Robert. If you were setting up a home gym, what equipment would you get, and in what order, if need, to stage the purchases over time? That's a kind of a fun little question. If you're setting up a home gym, what do you start with? The biggest issue, let's just do it in a logical way, and then we'll move into equipment. The first thing you have to think about is what space you have. Now, if you're in a dorm room, clearly, it's going to be dumbbells and kettlebells only because of space. If you have a situation like me where I have a massive 4-car garage, I have plenty of room. I can do anything I want year round. Other places I lived, I had a 1-car garage in one place, and I was able to push everything against the wall. I had a bunch of kettlebells and barbells, and that worked out okay. In the home I raised my daughters in, 2-car garage, not a lot of breathing space in there, but I was able to sneak a squat rack in. And so when you pulled up, you always had to drop everybody off before you pulled the car in the garage, because you could fit the cars in there, but you couldn't have people open the doors on the right side of the right car because there was all that equipment there in the way. That's a good memory. So it's space. When I was growing up in South San Francisco, I had this big porch that my father built, and that's where I trained. There was plenty of room. It was covered. It was full of flies in the summer, and it was freezing cold in the winter. And so first off, you want to start with what space do you have? If you have a lot of space and you can fit barbells and racks and things like that, that's mentally where we're going to head. If you have less space, we'll think more dumbbell, kettlebell, okay? And then from there, we have to make the first big decision. What equipment do you want? Now, for me, hi, I'm Dan John, and when I moved to California, I only had one piece of equipment at first. All I had was my original 28 kilo kettlebell. And I discovered amazing things with that 28 kilo kettlebell. The first and foremost is I could do the bulk of my training if I took it seriously with just that bell. Later, when we started the Coyote Point Kettlebell Club, and the PDF is free at danjohnuniversity.com. It's 51 pages. It's all the exercises we did. It's the story. It's even a whole bunch of our training ideas. You'll find a lot of that information in my books. And of course, you can probably just Google it. I do find it strange when people steal my Coyote Point Kettlebell Club and put it up for sale on these PDF sites because it's free. Why would you pay for it? So for me, where I'm at most of my life now, I would get in this order. A reasonable kettlebell. For most people, for males, I'd recommend a 20 at first. For most females, I'd recommend a 10 if we're just getting one. So a reasonable size kettlebell for you. From there, I would get a suspension trainer that works for you. Somewhere between the kettlebell and the suspension trainer, go to one of these thrift stores and pick up an ab wheel. But honestly, if you have a kettlebell, an ab wheel, and a suspension trainer, you probably, I don't know if you'd make it to Mr. Olympia or make it as a gold medal in the Olympics, but you could achieve the bulk of your goals with those three pieces of equipment. Okay, so there's your first set. So the first set of things, a kettlebell, 20, 10, 28, an ab wheel, whatever's appropriate for you. I use Sornex's because it's made out of stainless steel. It's big, and a lot of the people I train are big. And a suspension trainer. Ideally, if you can make sure you can hook it up on a ceiling is best. I don't trust the doorway hookups unless I'm on the road, and that's all I can use. So those are the big three. Those are the standard. Now, if you want to move into the Olympic lifts, I think a good Olympic lifting bar is not a bad thing to pick up. Your miles may vary. I had started my whole career with a Sears barbell. I got the original 110 set, 50 kilo set, and then I slowly cobbled together more and more plates from my neighbors. If you can get an adjustable bench that has squat standards on it, and you're training by yourself, like I did, that was my first major purchase. I worked for a year mowing lawns to buy my own, which, in hindsight, is pretty impressive for a little kid. I had an adjustable one so I could do a whole variety of incline benches, which worked out great. And if you put the bench press to vertical, then you had plenty of room to squat. And it was an older system. I don't know if they still sell them. So we got the big three: the kettlebell, the ab wheel, the suspension trainer. Then we're going to go in directions. If you want to do the Olympic lifts, I think you should get an Olympic bar. If you just want to have a barbell, you maybe can find a cheaper one, even a non-rotating one. One of my friends did very well with non-rotating bars his entire home training life. Clyde Emmerich was on our Olympic teams and a great lifter. He was also the strength coach for Chicago Bears. He did all of his training with just a good old-fashioned non-revolving bar and just stacked the plates on, so you can get very strong. If you decide to go down the barbell route, I would recommend a couple things. First, don't bench press when you're alone. Let's get that out there as soon as we can. I feel that incline bench pressing by yourself is okay. If something bad does happen, it will slide down. It will be uncomfortable trying to get that barbell off that area around your zipper, but at least you won't choke out. If you're gonna do upper body work at home with the barbell, I love cleaning every lift. I like to clean before I front squat. I like to clean before I press because I think it really adds a lot of conditioning. So learn how to clean, learn how to front squat, learn how to military press. For more information, of course, look into my Southwood workout. One word, Southwood, one word, the Southwood program. Well, once you have those standards, so you got your kettlebell, you got your barbell, depending on what you have, if you move into more kettlebells, I recommend you go to the classics as soon as you can. That's the 16, the 24, the 32. After that, people ask me the question about doubles. Now, if you bought the 20 first, now you have 4 kettlebells, the 20, the 16, the 24, and the 32. If you're going to go to doubles, double that 20 first, because double kettlebells, front squats with the 20s is not a bad load. Doubles, you can do the armor building complex. You can do double presses with the 20s. You can even do some, I don't mind the idea of doing like the 32 with one hand and 16 with the other on seesaw press, switch them out. I like those kinds of things. If you decide to go down the kettlebell way, think that way. So the single one first, then the classics, and then start doubling up. I wouldn't go for a home trainer much more in the 32. Frankly, you'll get that huge one, use it a few times, and then it'll just sit there as a doorstop the rest of your life. There is value to getting some lighter ones, but frankly, and probably my friends who sell kettlebells won't want to know this, but if you're going to go lighter on kettlebells for different things, you might as well just get, in our case at our gym, we sometimes just use dumbbells for like Turkish get-ups or anything. I know a lot of people now are doing sandbag Turkish get-ups, and I know there's all kinds of things you can do. But really, I have 32 kettlebells. My numbers keep going up all the time because people keep giving me more. But frankly, in my own personal training, I probably use 5 total kettlebells. I use double 20s. Yeah, the 24s. I use the double 36s for farmer walks. And I do a lot of snatches with the 16. I have an 18. I use that too. But really, for me, it's the double 20s. The 24 are the bulk of what I use them for. So, yeah, I use the 16 for this and that. I use the 18 for this and that. And yeah, I use the heavier ones for this and that. But as I even think about it, double 20s and a 24 is what I need. I have 3 Olympic bars, and I use all 3 of them now 3 days a week. So I use the light female bar when I do my snatch complex warm-ups. I keep the old beat up bar as my squat bar, and I just leave it on the rack. And then I have my bright red snatch and clean and jerk bar. If you're going to Olympic lift on your own at home, you do want to probably have over time, get yourself a quality bar, and that's all you need for a long time. If you decide to go cheap, that's fine for the short term. Slide that cheap bar into becoming your warm-up bar, and then later on your squat bar. All the other stuff, I would go to Perform Better, and go to their hands-on, go to their workshops. I don't remember what they charge me for mini bands, but the black mini bands for a pack are they're nothing. I do have Brett Contreras' hip thrust, the hip bands. I think they have great value. I think they come in a 3 or 6 pack. Well worth your time. While you're at Perform Better, you might want to pick up some stretchy bands. You might want to pick up the only medicine ball I recommend is the Dynamax 4-pounder, 2 kilo one. That gets the most use. I think when people started using those 20-pound medicine balls, I know maybe in your tiny little part of the planet it sounds good, but I like to be able to blow things up, hit them against walls, play catch with them, and those 20s they don't work. I hate those bouncy ones. Those are so dangerous. My good friend Kevin Mass got himself in the face one day doing slam ball. Slam ball is a poor man's ab wheel. So, kettlebell, ab wheel, suspension trainer. Then make your barbell decision or more kettlebell decision, or like me, kind of swim through both. Pick up some mini bands, pick up a hip thrust band, hip band, and then start to think about things later now. Now we're down the line. We've invested, we've used them. I'm probably thinking you should be about 2 years for this. Then look at an expensive rack setup. However you do it. I use very inexpensive racks at my gym. I have a whole bunch of equipment. I have 2 hip thrust machines, but that's also because I've been doing this since 1965. But for those of you who are new to this, take your time building up piece by piece your equipment. I know some rich people who put in home gyms. They go to a company, and I'm sure the salesman goes like this, because and here's the thing. Treadmills, I believe I read in Consumer Reports, have an average use of 7.2 times, and then they become clothes holders. Steppers, very few people use home steppers. I had that Concept 2 rower I gave away because we never used it in my gym. $1,300 investment, but no one ever used it. And I kept trying to get people to use it, and people just didn't. And I know I'm going to get an email, well, I use mine all the time. Well, good for you. And you're probably like me. I use my Olympic bars 3 days a week. I use my kettlebells 5 days a week. But until you get grounded, take your time building up your equipment. And as you're building up your equipment, this is the most important point, build up your technical expertise and your knowledge base. Knowledge is tearing things apart. Wisdom is putting them back together. When you're going through this process of learning everything, you need to tear those exercises apart and then build them back together. Great question. Thanks for asking. This might be our last question here. Ben asks, why is the clean called the clean? Now, it's only called the clean, the snatch, and the jerk in the English-speaking countries. The Germans call it the single and the double. The Olympic lifts are called the single and the double. I've heard so many different ways to describe the lifts. The reason it's called a clean is because you're taking it off the floor. You're cleaning the floor. Clean, clean. Somebody told me that's what I just said is not true. It actually is from the German root, blah, 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 which means this, and yeah, whatever. Snatch is a very old term. There's, I believe, a Brad Pitt film called Snatched. Snatch is an old term for stealing things. It's a very quick thing. You snap it away from you snatch the pebble out of my hand. So that's where the snatch comes from. Why is the jerk called the jerk? When I was young, bad cars had a herky-jerky movement to it. A jerk is a popping movement. It's also someone who's an idiot. Well, what are the values of these exercises? You don't ask that. But, what are the benefits of the clean, the snatch, and the jerk are probably more important why we name them. The snatch is one of the most explosive things a human person can do. I think it trains the body to be coordinated, mobile, and flexible all at the same time. And like I learned when I was a child, if I'm wrestling you and I know I can snatch you up over my head, that's going to help me in our competition. I think the clean is probably one of the most forgotten but most important moves. I've thought for a long time in my life that one of the mistakes you modern people are doing is that we didn't have racks when I was growing up. You cleaned everything. So to squat, you clean the weight up to your chest, and then you did front squats. If you want to do back squats, you clean the weight up to your chest, popped it onto your back, did your high rep back squats, your 50 with your body weight, popped it back on your chest and brought it to the ground. That was tough. That was tough to do. The clean is one of those exercises. When I get an adolescent boy to clean over 295 kilos, you can see on the field of play they're a different athlete. One year I had 62 boys clean 205, which is 95 kilos. 62 high school boys cleaned that weight for our football team. Well, we were a pretty good football team. The value of the clean, it is a whole body movement. In my little red book here, these are just random notes I've been keeping since 1973 from a sport. I saw a Sports Illustrated article written by Terry Todd that I liked a lot. And I wrote down everything he wrote about Kolev here. And then when Arnold's book came out, I wrote what Arnold said about modesty and his secrets of success. Throughout this book here, I have a lot of quotes from great Soviet coaches, great American coaches, about the importance of the clean. And kind of for a while there in my coaching career, when in doubt, more cleans. I just think it's an amazing exercise. Jerks, your mileage may vary, but I'll tell you one thing. Somewhere in Bigger, Faster, Stronger, they have a video of me jerking 175 kilos, which is 385 for a set of 5. I'll tell you one thing. When you can jerk that much over your head, you're going to throw the disc in the shot put pretty well that season, and I did. The snatch and the clean and jerk are the far right on my movement matrix, which means that they encompass every other exercise that I coach and teach. If all you did is snatch and clean and jerk, which is what I do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you'd have a pretty good program. And pretty good is pretty good. So I hope that helped, Ben. It's a good question. It really is. Well, listen, that's it. Well, thanks so much for listening. I'm Dan John. This is podcast number 163. And again, if you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. As I always say, I'll do my best to answer each and every one. And I'll be back next week with some more. And until then, let's all keep on lifting and learning.